Welcome to Between Two
Nerds.
I am the State Chief Technology Officer, Nick Stowe, and this is where I introduce my guest, Joanne Markert, who is the Geographic Information Officer for the state of Washington. On this series, I don't know if I ever told you this, so what I do is I invite interesting people who are doing cool things in technology in the state of Washington to come talk about it. Can you tell me a little bit first about what GIS is and what you do?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, which is kind of a mouthful, but that's basically how we take geography and put it into computer systems. And that takes a lot of work. It's pretty complicated. People specialize in it, but then also a lot of people use it, and that makes it hard too because it has to be a simple design and interface so that it can be accessible on your phones, accessible on your computers, helping our agencies.
So it helps when I'm looking at a map on my phone and I see where all the things are. This is the technology that helps make that happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of important.
Fish and Wildlife has one of the best implementations of that, I think. They have the Go Fish and the Go Hunt. And it turns out Washington has a very complex set of rules and regulations regarding hunting and fishing. Mm-hmm. And so really the best way to know about it is where are you and what is allowed and what kind of licenses are needed. And so they develop all of that through GIS. It's authoritative. It's from Fish and Wildlife. You access it through your map, and then you're able to also stay in compliance.
So those examples are super helpful when you talk about what GIS looks like in our lives. One thing maybe bigger or kind of broader. So I know at WaTech, we've been talking a lot about connected government and transforming public service through a connected government. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you see GIS as an example of how we are achieving a connected government and how we're connecting things, sometimes literally?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of GIS as connected government. Because it forms the common language for a lot of the different critical features that we have in our state, whether we're looking at endangered species, whether we're looking at equity, broadband access, any of those things. The commonality is geography. We can even map money so we can understand where we're spending money and whether or not we're making a difference on those things that are important to us.
Oh, when you say commonality, you mean like literally the land is the same.
The land is the same.
I get you. So can you give me one or two other examples of how GIS or mapping technology shows up in our lives and helps us make decisions or do things?
Mm-hmm. So many of our agencies use GIS. One of the examples that I like is from Department of Transportation. They map marine mammal locations when they are doing construction on our ferry terminals. And that's something that we have to report to the federal government, NOAA, and the National Marine Fisheries Service, because we don't want to be harming those animals, and we're in their environment making a lot of really loud noises. And so we have to map that, and that's required to do our business. So there's another example.
One other question I have for you is, what are some examples of trends that you've seen in GIS technology, and what are a couple, or maybe just one example of where you see GIS going in terms of the future of the technology and how it can help us do more cool things?
Sure. Well, I think it's an exciting time to be in IT in general and GIS specifically. We collect information at very high resolution now. Before, we were so happy to have 30 meter by 30 meter blocks of information across the landscape, but now we can get it down to 6 inches. And so that's a much different way of looking at it, much more detailed, much more able to look at impervious surfaces, tree canopy, all that kind of information. And that's been a trend for quite some time. Looking at that change over time, that detailed resolution will help us show where there might be landslides, where there's washouts, where there's hazards to avoid, things like that. And also changes based on urban development in some of our communities.
I'm glad you said that, because when you started with 30 meter by 30 meter to 6 inch, I was like, well, what do we do with it? So that's helpful. It's very cool. So you said you had a question or two for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think GIS is a very strategic component to Washington State technology. And I'm really glad that it's here in WaTech so that we can be leaders on that. I was just wondering, sort of, how do you see it incorporating into some of our other technologies? How do you see it with IT in general, that relationship, and how do we make that relationship and integration even stronger?
Ooh. That's like 7 questions.
Oh, I told you I was going to pepper it.
Okay, that's fine. I think one thing that's always important to me to talk about how our technology helps build trust in our government. And so kind of GIS is a technology being able to help us align with and execute against our privacy principles. And so like data anonymization is a really common deployment of GIS technology. So I think that's one area. It really helps us preserve and promote trust. The other, say 2 other areas. One is GIS is a good example of a discipline in technology that requires lots of data. And so we have an enterprise data program that we're establishing, and we have a cloud program. And so in both of those areas, we're looking at, well, how can we look at GIS as an area where we can help support the growth of, like you just mentioned, 30 by 30 to 6 inches, that's a whole lot of more data to capture and to be able to analyze. So let's see, how can our technology infrastructure help support that? Okay. Oh, wait, really quickly? I'm sorry. I have a joke for you.
Okay.
It's a GIS joke.
Those are hard to come by, so
I know,
I'm anxious to hear it.
All right. Why did the map need to go to therapy?
I haven't heard this one.
Yeah.
Why?
It had issues with projection.
Oh my goodness.
It's good, right?
I don't know if our audience will totally understand, but projections as coordinate systems.
I did not understand it at all, but I was hoping you would.